The following Frontlines report is presented without commercial interruption by FNH USA.
This is a Frontlines special report. Chuck Holton, our Frontlines correspondent, has been to Boston. Sitting beside me, Eric Stakelbeck, host of Stakelbeck on Terror and author of the book, The Terrorist Next Door. Let's talk about what happened on April 15th. You've been to Boston. You've seen this. Describe the mayhem that you saw right there at the finish line of the marathon.
You know, I arrived about 12 hours after the bomb went off, and it was still pretty chaotic. There were so many law enforcement agencies all coming together that had not worked together before. Some of them had, some of them had not. You're talking different standard operating procedures, different communication structures. You've got the National Guard in the mix, and everybody's trying to figure out what to do on the fly. One of the things that interests me about Boston is the response. And I'd like to hear what Eric has to say about what you see in this kind of response, where they're bringing in thousands of officers from all the surrounding states, from all different agencies, and they're all trying to respond at once. Does that help or hurt the progress of the investigation?
You know, I would think, Chuck, in some senses it would help. It's funny, they've actually said that this is one of the most videotaped events in history, this Boston bombing. So you would think in one sense it does help. You have more boots on the ground, more people to help with the investigation, to check cell phone records. Another aspect here is pressure cookers were used in these bombs. I'm sure they're checking out the records of everyone who's bought a pressure cooker in the Boston area over the past month or so. So I would say more boots on the ground helps in certain ways, as long as people aren't stepping on each other's toes. I'm sure when the FBI comes in, they obviously take over the brunt of the investigation from the local law enforcement, but I would say every bit helps.
We had gone down to be military presence on the marathon route itself, finished our job. We were relatively early in the race. When we went home, I was back in my living room before anything happened. We had soldiers from my unit were in the race. In fact, one of them was about a half mile from the finish line when the explosions happened.
I did hear kind of something in the far distance. I had no idea what it was. And I did have my phone on me, and my sister told me what happened. And I was scared, frightened, had, realized that really no one around me had no idea.
We didn't realize anything horrible had happened until our daughter called us. She had been at Fenway Park at the Red Sox game. And when she was checking to make sure we were okay, and that was the first we heard that something had happened, and we immediately turned on the TV and, were really horrified along with everybody else about what had occurred.
My sister was about a block away from the second explosion, and then my fiance's mom and his aunt were in between the two. To just get that information kind of puts all that out the window, and then you're scared, frightened, startled.
You get upset, defensive, and angry, and at the same time, in this position, protective. You want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else.
As the hours passed, details began to emerge. 3 dead, nearly 300 wounded, an all too familiar scene for those guardsmen who had served in Afghanistan or Iraq. Only this time, it wasn't a far-flung war zone. It was happening in their own backyard. That made it personal.
I think it's safe to say that the majority of our soldiers were actually impacted directly.
It's one thing to go out and do for the idea of country. It's another thing when they step in your town and do it.
I'm just like, I can't believe it still. It's just unbelievable to be so close to something, and this area is so significant to me.
It's only been 24 hours since the bombs went off. The flags are flying at half-staff, and most of the runners have gone home. They've been replaced by police officers, military, and other law enforcement agencies that have locked down the center of the city as they conduct their investigation.
Monday afternoon, my unit got the word that they were getting activated, and we pushed out, disseminated to all our troops.
My husband and I drive an emergency response vehicle, and we bring supplies and food to disaster areas. So we arrived in Boston at 6 o'clock the next morning, and we're told to go down near the site of where the explosions occurred. And there was an incredible amount of Hummers from National Guard, and obviously this was the command center for the police, the National Guard, the sheriff's units, the SWAT teams.
We're working with the Boston Police Department, the people who've trained for this for years, and they understand what it's like to integrate with different services. You know, the civilian support team, the FBI, etc. So we're just one more piece in that puzzle.
A lot of these guys are run low on sleep, but I mean, you walk around, there's no signs of exhaustion or anything, and these guys are just focused on doing their piece.
The guardsmen stayed out of the limelight, standing guard over the crime scene and working around the clock to help enable the police to bring the perpetrators to justice. Other military branches added their resources to the effort. Here, Coast Guardsmen use a remotely piloted submersible to inspect Boston Harbor for any threats.
A lot of the National Guard has slept in their vehicles overnight, and we had some breakfast sandwiches. The local McDonald's up here on Tremont Street had donated coffee, sandwiches, orange juice, and so we were able to go around and give them something warm to eat to kind of wake up, semi-wake up after a tough night.
The first responders were incredibly effective, made sure that people were safe, and didn't create a scene, which helped make it feel less chaotic.
As they were being deployed out, we were able to fill up their vehicles with water and drinks, and just give whatever kind of support we could during the day. And so we figured there'd be a need again today. We knew they weren't going anyplace, so we came back again this morning to do the same today. Part of our job is not just to give out foods or things like that, but to listen and just to talk to people and give them a little bit of a break too from what they're doing that can be very difficult.
It's Wednesday morning, and the FBI agents behind me are still combing the scene of the bombing, looking for any piece of evidence they can get that will give them some clues to who did this and why.
A lot of people are very focused on the mission, and there's little to no sign of anybody cutting corners or anything. They're here to make sure that everybody's safe.
The men and women of the Massachusetts National Guard are making one thing clear: they will not stand by and let terror take root in their backyard.
Everybody was combined in the effort. We had police, we had the SWAT, we had Air Force, we had Army, and everybody just came in and they understood the intent.
This is the job they signed up to do, and they're happy to do it, and we're happy to be able to support them in any way we can.
We are here until the job's done.
It's a beautiful spring day here in Boston Commons, and the locals who have come out to enjoy it say they're bound and determined to get their lives back on track as soon as possible. That's being made a little easier by the efforts of the military and law enforcement who are still prominently on display in this area. For the Life of Duty Network, I'm Chuck Holton in Boston, Massachusetts.
There's an old expression in the Middle East: the Americans wear watches, they have time. We've seen that we've got to be right 100% of the time. They have to be right once. Give us a sense for where we're headed.
It's death by 1,000 cuts. That's the strategy. Prick away with a Boston, with a Fort Hood, with a Times Square bombing, hurt the U.S. economy, carry out, God forbid, an attack in a shopping mall during the Christmas shopping season. We saw a plot in Portland, homegrown Somali jihadist, U.S. citizen back in 2010, plotting to blow up a Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Thousands of people would have been there. That's the goal, the terror, psychological, economic. They're not going to conquer us, but man, they're very patient. This is a long-term thing. If they can chip away gradually, they say, hey, all we've got is time.
Thank you, Eric, for that, and thank you for a great report from Boston. From the front lines of freedom in Boston, Massachusetts, I'm Oliver North on the Life of Duty Network.